Om Ratu turun sore, Pak. Om Ratu turun sore. Waduh, tidak deh.
that we can make too across the board. So there's more of a, I've been in Washington for 10 years. There's more of a focus on this than ever before. There's always been a focus there, but more than ever before, and I'm more optimistic maybe than some.
I think we need to look at this world and understand that some of the best weaponry is human brain and human brain power, and the thing that helped us win the Cold War were the refugees and former scientists from both sides that came and worked in the United States post World War II, and we had a very loose and liberal refugee policy for some top brains to come and work for us. I mean, they're the ones that helped create NASA and help us again push past the Soviets. Right now, we are kicking out some of the best minds in the world and sending them back to China. We have some men and women that we have trained in our university systems that have been subsidized by the taxpayer. They've done they're in some of the most beautiful research labs in the world. Is Donald Trump the most beautiful research labs in the world? I don't know, you do it better, Donald Trump, than I do. And now they're taking all that knowledge, because we didn't want to give them a legal permanent residency or visa, and they're taking their families and they're going to China. China's literally offering them millions of dollars, their own labs, everything else for them to stay there. We didn't even have to do that. We just had to say, hey, stay in our country and be part of our future. We didn't do that. It's quite the opposite. We're actually kicking them out as fast as possible. Number two, we're destroying another areas of innovation our university researchers, our research universities. We are consistently cutting funding for the last couple of years. That type of investment, has a multiplier effect in terms of what it brings to the economy. A lot of these universities are no longer investing in the labs and the tech that we used to be able to spin out into both tech and into the defense world. And it's not necessarily being picked up by private industry because it is expensive. It can take a long time to get ROI, if you get any ROI at all. And even if you can have that research lab, the people that are actually going to do the work there, the brain power, is now overseas. It doesn't necessarily have to be China. It could also be Singapore. It could also be Taiwan. It could also be France. France is literally handing out to any American researcher their version of legal permanent residency plus for their kids to come. And so we are absolutely not doing as best as we can. I'm not saying that we are, shifting into, a very dangerous situation, but we really need to turn this around. We don't want to lose the brain power race that is important for us, that was very key to us winning the Cold War. We need to win the next war, and that brain power is found a lot in the United States, but it also is found a lot of places around the world, and they want to come here and they want to be with us, and we should let them be here as fast as possible.
All right, we'll have to. And if you are just joining us on Live Now from Fox, we've been listening into this live event out of Washington, D.C. Once again, this is the National Security Innovation Base Summit. This was a 2-day event. This is the last day. As we've been bringing you these live discussions, that right there was with Senator Jim Banks as well as Senator Ruben Gallegos speaking about the Iran war. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Christy Matino. It is a new hour here on Live Now from Fox. We are going to bring you back out to that live event and several others in this coming hour, so stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. I'm your host, Christy Matino. So this live event out of Washington, D.C. does appear to be in a brief intermission right now. So we wanted to talk about the latest in the Middle East, as we do know that the first message from Iran's new supreme leader is set to be released here any moment now. We're keeping an eye on that feed. We do have it routed in here. Unclear as well if there's going to be an English translation, if it is going to be himself who is delivering this message. We're very unclear as of right now, but once we do get that in here, we will bring it to you. I wanted to bring you this live look here out of Jerusalem this morning as I share with you just a little bit of the latest of what we know. As we have been covering this, a lot of rapid developments have been coming in here. We do know the Israel Defense Forces said today it has started launching a wide-scale wave of strikes targeting Iranian terror regime infrastructure across the country. And following that announcement, the IDF said, quote, as part of the waves of strikes completed in the past days in Tehran, the Israeli Air Force, acting on precise IDF intelligence, struck an additional Iranian nuclear program site. The compound was utilized by the regime to advance critical capabilities for developing nuclear weapons. So that's the latest there from the IDF that I wanted to share with you here. Also, Israel Katz held a security assessment with military officials today in the Army's headquarters in Tel Aviv after the largest attack yet by Hezbollah in the Iran war. He warned Lebanon that if its government does not prevent Hezbollah from attacking, Israel, quote, will take the territory and do it ourselves. That was in a video statement released by his office. And also, I wanted to share with you this piece of information that President Volodymyr Zelensky says Ukraine seeks to sign a major agreement with the United States on drone production, but requires White House approval. That deal would cover various types of drones and air defense systems operating as a single system capable of protecting against hundreds or even thousands of Iranian-designed drones and missiles. Zelensky says he hopes U.S. officials may be more inclined to support such an agreement in light of Middle East security challenges. Now, I also wanted to just let you know, if you are tuning in here, we were just sharing once again that Iran's new supreme leader soon to be releasing a message here. And once we do get that in here, we will bring it to you. It does appear now that this live event has gone back underway here, the National Security Innovation Based Summit in Washington, D.C. So let's head back out live.
We're honored to welcome Senator Kevin Cramer, who serves on the Armed Services Committee and is the co-chair of the Senate Defense Modernization Caucus. Admiral Chris Grady, who until about 6 months ago served in uniform as vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Doug Philippone from Snowpoint Ventures, who has also worked at Palantir and importantly serves on the advisory board for the report card. And Christian Rodriguez, who's a partner at McKinsey & Company. Christian, we're so glad to have McKinsey as a knowledge partner on this report card, working with us over the last several months to assemble, in particular, the fact base that goes into the analysis. Several of the research team members are here today, so we're glad that they were able to join us as well. Hope some of you are able to connect with them. But Christian, let me start with you as we begin the conversation, and let's go ahead and pull up the grading overview slide on the screens. For those in the room who may be looking at the report card for the first time this year, what do we measure? And for those who maybe are coming to it now in its fourth iteration and are familiar with where the report card has been over time, what are the most important grades and trends, key takeaways this year?
Thank you. Thank you, Rachel, for the warm welcome. Thank you and congratulations on an amazing report card this year. It's thoughtful, it's insightful. Congratulations on staging this amazing event. Let's get into the report card real quick. So the report card focuses on 10 indicators measuring sort of the health of the national security innovation base. The first 3 of those you can think of as sort of output indicators, right? So measures of the impact the innovation base is having on national security, and the other 7 as input indicators, right? So things that are leading indicators to progress towards those outputs. If we just look at the grades really quickly, for the output indicators, relatively flat set of scores. A minor downtick on innovation, and a lot of the story here is while the U.S. is the undisputed leader in the world on innovation, there are pockets, particularly around dual-use technologies, where other parts of the world are making headway. Right, so progress around AI, advanced communications, and 5G and 6G are areas to watch out for. On the input indicators, maybe the standout here is a 2-letter grade lift on customer clarity. We'll get into this in a minute, but I think that's the highlight of this year's report, complemented by upticks in private sector innovation and manufacturing. offset by minor downticks in talent, in public sector innovation, and infrastructure. If we think of maybe move to the next slide, please, and I promise this won't be death by PowerPoint. This is the only slide. The last slide I'll present. If you look at three kind of key themes that emerge here, the first and maybe most important one is the foundational building blocks for modernization transformation are coming into place. This point around customer clarity we see as a tremendously important leading indicator. The customer has gotten sharper and clearer, not just about the type of equipment it wants, but the types of technologies they want their partners investing in, and they're putting the budget capital behind it to help underwrite that investment. Right, we're talking about $1 trillion budgets in 2026, whispers, and we'll see what happens, of $1.5 trillion budgets in 2027. That sets a high aspiration and does a lot to animate industry. And maybe as importantly, the acquisition system is modernizing and reforming as well. Right, we're seeing contract officers get new tools and techniques for accelerating procurement and rewarding industrial partners that respond proportionately. We see progress in the DIB, highlighted by the defense tech sector. Defense tech now represents about 1% of total acquisition, really leading the charge in areas like AI, autonomy, space, munitions, and sensing. We're seeing green shoots in the traditional heritage defense players, where they are starting to invest more and more ahead of demand. More clarity on the defense on the demand signal, particularly around appropriations and multi-year procurement, may help accelerate that trend. And green shoots in manufacturing, though more can be done, but notable highlights around the shipbuilding, energetics, maybe offset by work to be done around kind of the talent that fuels that manufacturing base and building an infrastructure that helps bring new players and new participants into the ecosystem. Lastly, we'd say that we're, I think, on the cusp of real reform and real transformation. I think investments and, frankly, political will and policy will is needed to see it through. The work that private capital is doing to transform the sector is tremendous. Private equity is doing a ton to reshape and rethink and recatalyze defense contractors. Venture capital seeding a lot of those exciting disruptors. The one thing we'll note here is a lot of that investment is very application focused, kind of downstream and shorter term ROI. So thinking about how we bring more private sector innovation into the key enabling technologies that are maybe 10 years away that can enable the next generation of distinctive systems. We'd also note that policy and politics can still be a little bit tumultuous. For all the positiveness around customer clarity, a continuing resolution, a shutdown has a ripple effect in the investor base. As somebody who advises a lot of folks in the private capital space, I will get a rushed phone call every time a piece of news hits, and there's some calming that needs to happen in that client conversation. But I think a lot to be excited about, a lot of momentum in the report. Be exciting to see how the progress on input indicators translates to outputs.
Well, thanks, Christian. Very helpful overview and good baseline for our conversation with the panel. Doug, let me come to you next. Christian mentioned this 2-letter grade lift on our customer clarity indicator. That's the demand signal that the U.S. government as customer sends to private sector partners. It's the biggest year-on-year grade improvement we've seen in the history of the report card. From your seat inside defense tech investment, backing companies, you've been inside a company trying to sell to the Pentagon. Is the government a better customer?
Well, I think the macro line, yes. I've been doing this for 20 years now in the venture side for a little over 5, and it's probably the best macro setup that I've seen in my lifetime. The challenge is still, it's still slow, like having a budget, a budget center. Even though you're not.
I'm waiting.
But yeah, I know. You did your job. No, I mean, look, there's still like a lot of scary, bad things, but the macro setup, like the really high budgets. I like to think on our side of the house, I get this question from LPs all the time: is this a phenomenon of just the Trump administration and just really helping them understand that it's really a bipartisan issue? And in the defense tech side, you can do, it is a bit of a sacred cow where it's like, we're not going to get $1.5 trillion budgets, but we could do better. If we're selling a better mousetrap that's better, faster, cheaper, we can do well in a bigger budget item, but we can do just as well or better in a low budget environment. So even if it went below 800, we would still do well. Could we do a lot better in terms of, I think right now when people ask me, like, what do you need from the government right now, between the administration and Congress, there's been enough acquisition reform and sincerity from the administration. Like, they're serious, they're moving fast, they're cutting back red tape, they're serious about competition. What I always, like, you know, back in my Palantir days, the biggest thing that I fought for initially was, let's compete based off of a real thing, as opposed to a PowerPoint dream that will be built in the future. And now you see with you know, the leadership in the Pentagon, there's a huge push to do that, where it's like, hey, we're going to do prototype testing right away, and then we're going to get you to fielding equipment as fast as possible. Could we move faster? Yes. There are terrifying moments where you're like, where's the contracting officer? Where's this payment? Mm-hmm. You know, we're doing what we said. The one thing is, like, my side of the house, you know, we're just hitting $1 billion under management, which is super exciting, but I'm, like, maximally exposed to, like, this better work out. We're writing big checks, and I feel like the partnership is there. I feel like it's going to be a huge win, but I am way in the deep end.
All right, so we continue to listen in there to the National Security Innovation Base Summit underway there in Washington, D.C. Now, if you are just tuning in here, this is the 4th annual summit that's convening lawmakers, senior national security officials, and leading innovators there at the Ronald Reagan Institute in Washington, D.C. for this 2-day event. We've heard from several speakers already this morning as this last day does continue. We're going to step away for a commercial break on Live Now from Fox. Much more news and live events to come. Stay with us. Welcome back, and we are going to continue with this live event out of Washington, D.C., listening into these discussions at the National Security Innovation Base Summit.
Let's see how that enforcement mechanism really works, right? So now we've gone to a time-based incentive system, and what I think the administration is looking for, and I think the industry is willing to do, is to go from being a company's to go from being a financial engineer, right, to a real engineering firm, right, where it's engineering of excellence and of quality and of speed. And if you don't, then the compliance mechanisms will kick in, things like stock buybacks and executive pay. Let's look for the first enforcement action of that to see whether that helps encourage the behavior that we're looking for. Another might be the translation rate. So as other transaction authorities are used, do they then rapidly move into programs of record? I think we can measure that. These are the types of things that we want to measure. It's a form of adoption rate, and I think we should all be looking at that. This is the prototype to program of record.
Yeah.
Right.
It has to speed up.
It has to speed up, and 2 years is too long. And so let's measure that and see then whether that's working. And I guess the last one would be, can we and will we apply this to legacy systems? Right? That's a big one. And that's maybe a tough one, but I'll be looking for that as well.
Senator, lots on the table to react to here and would invite you to do so, but I'd love to ask you in particular about the defense modernization assessment in the report card. Christian mentioned it's our output indicator, our leading output indicator. If everything else is moving in the report card and that defense modernization grade is not improving, there's a disconnect somewhere, and we assess defense modernization at a D, not encouraging, for the third year in a row. I have to think that's a large part of why you and your colleagues started the Defense Modernization Caucus. But give us your reaction. Is that deserved or too harsh? And more to the point, what needs to happen to actually start translating, as Admiral Grady was talking about, some of these innovation advancements into delivered capabilities?
Sure. A couple of things. The first thing that came to mind during this discussion was I keep thinking of Angus King in a hearing or a briefing saying, yeah, but why do we keep testing these things there when we could be testing them over there? Why are we not testing directed energy, against the Houthis rather than preparing for them while they're taking our... There's reasons for both ways. And I think one of the things that's encouraging about the report, and by this discussion, by the way, but Doug, you need to call Christian on a regular basis because he calms everybody. I noticed the relationship, but is that there really is an attitudinal shift that's happening, even as crystallizing across party lines and between appropriators and the authorizers, that this is for real. This is no fooling for real. Obviously, tragically, the Russia-Ukraine situation has given us a real view of what happens in the fog of war is the clarity of demand, and so we're learning some of that. We're seeing it now play out. About the D though on modernization, it's probably earned. Maybe it could be. It should be a little better, but I think it's fine to be pushed. Because I was also thinking at the very moment you were talking about, I was thinking, but we are doing the F-47. The B-21 is coming along quite well on the big things, right? The big Sentinel. I mean, in North Dakota, it warms my heart to know that we'll be last to get Sentinel to replace those 70-year-old missiles. But at least our 70-year-old B-52s are getting new engines and LRSOs at the same time as the B-21's on schedule, on budget, right, ahead of schedule. And so there's some encouraging trends there that I think are earned, but I think it's also an illustration of that attitudinal shift. I was thinking, and I hadn't even really thought about it, Admiral, until a few minutes ago, that it might have been the last time you and I talked. Well, shortly after, Senator Sullivan and I, and this gets to the customer, I want us to all feel better about our customer. When Senator Sullivan and I, as the Golden Dome guys, right, requested a meeting with the deputy sec, with Steve Feinberg, neither one of us had met him. And so we had breakfast over at the Pentagon, had a wonderful discussion, talked about the need for speed, that we need to keep up with the adversaries, and how is this going to happen? What about space-based interceptors and ground interceptors? And could we put them all in Alaska? And all the things that Senator Sullivan often talks about. Anyway, and we had a great discussion, and I thought, is this business guy for real? And that this is clearly a different attitude about the Pentagon, coming from a guy who, I don't know if he'd ever been in the Pentagon before he got the job. And it was very refreshing, but here's what was most refreshing. A couple of weeks after that, he and Admiral Grady together called me to give me an update on munitions acquisition reform and munitions stockpiling. And I thought, wow, these people are dead serious. They're not only serious about the mission, they're serious about the communication to the other part of the customer formula. So I'll wait for the C minus or C or C plus to be demonstrated in the outcome. But I think the report card adequately tells us that we're going in the right direction, and there's some reason for hope.
Let's stay on defense modernization for a bit. We've heard, I think, in different ways from the senator and the admiral on what an improved grade would look like. Doug, Christian, let me come to you here. A little lightning round in the middle of the panel. What would an A look like on defense modernization, Doug?
Yeah, I think one of the problems we've seen is to the admiral's point about moving money around and having like the ability to move existing budgets, sort of like, with the Army's example, is like, we don't need more Humvees. So can I like stop buying all these Humvees that I don't want or I can't use, and that frees up hundreds of millions of dollars. Like stuff like that where there's flexibility, where they can move fast. I think that there are multiple different programs where you can apply money, you can buy things, and you can get things into the field fast, and just to see if they're able to do that and actually move. Like, are we buying prototypes in? Can we get a path to production? And can we accelerate the production if you accelerate the testing and you get through? Like, if we build the better mousetrap, how fast can you get it out there?
Okay.
Like, that's measurable.
Yeah, we have. Sorry, Admiral.
Well, you wanted to. I have a thought on this too.
Yeah.
I think that one thing that we want to look for in defense modernization is, can that ecosystem, that base, go from just in time to just in case? How can it do that? What does that look like? And we're going to need to be able to do that going into the future. And it leads into investments in the production floor, what that looks like, advanced robotics and the rest, how you bring AI into the foundry side of how we do things. All of that is going to be really important. But we're built for just in time right now. Yeah. Can we be built for just in case?
Christian, on this point, one of the most alarming stats that we have in the report card this year is that the average time to deliver initial capabilities for major programs increased just in the last year by 18 months. It now takes nearly 12 years. What does an A look like for defense modernization?
I think the Admiral started to touch on it. There's a two-speed model that's emerging. There's a set of capabilities that are intrinsically unique, military-specific, right, next generation stealth, certain types of launch, certain types of effects, list goes on and on and on. That momentum needs to be sustained, and we can do more to get those systems out the door quickly, on time, and on schedule, while not losing the sight of, for all the great investment that's coming in to kind of later stage applications, work needs to be done to seed kind of the innovation of like hard physics stuff that takes 10, 20 years to crack to get to that next generation of disruption. And we can't lose sight of that for all the exuberance of the short term. On the flip side, there's that second speed, which is about tapping into the commercial ecosystem, right? Letting commercial actors invest and make miracles in AI and semiconductors that can be leveraged in and then create kind of that ability to surge, right? So how do we get other parts of the industrial base activated a little bit like we had, in the 40s, right? To surge to capability and production using referenceable designs that can be scaled up quickly. And balancing those two speeds, like it's a little bit of two different narratives, right? It's two different sets of policies and it's two different sets of incentives, but just making sure that we keep sight of both while driving towards the immediate and the acute.
So back to momentum, right? The Warfighter Acquisition System, the WAS, talks about commercial first. Right? It's the first time we've heard that in a long, long time. And
well, that's not the first time I've heard that, if you know my story.
It's the first time you've heard it in writing from leadership and the rest to say, this is how we're gonna grade you, right? And so I think that's really, really important, because that allows you to go faster. Now,
well, to that point, there's a big shift with the current leadership in the Pentagon, which I love, is that there was always this frozen middle, that whether the civilian appointees were in power or not, and they were all saying the same stuff to appease us and doing nothing, there was this frozen middle that was just locked. Yeah. And now all those folks are getting run out of town, which I love, and they can't hide. And you're either on board or you're not, and nobody's going to slow roll things. I mean, because that's the biggest thing in bureaucracy. It's like they're agile.
For sure. But let me share a couple thoughts because I look to the example of the Space Development Agency, which we stood up just a few years ago. It came under almost immediate resistance by the bureaucracy. Some of us pushed it hard through, but the idea of, for example, spiral development of satellites is a game changer. I mean, when the Secretary and I went out to Vandenberg to see the first 21 or 22 York satellites going into LEO, and granted it took a little while to get to the first ones, but the idea that the next 21 will be from a different company, and maybe the next 21 will be from, and then by the time you get to Tranche 3 and beyond, every few months you're going to have maybe a different company. You have an incentive, a long-term demand signal. You have an incentive to innovate, and frankly, if you don't innovate, yours isn't in the next 21 or 22. We need to do a lot more of that. We need to encourage it, but I think a lot of it comes down from my side of the customer. Too many people in my business want to catch you doing the wrong thing or failing, right? And so that naturally leads to the frozen middle. And so when we take that away and we say, no, test that directed energy in a safe way out on the battlefield, we can't wait any longer, or whatever the case might be, instead of saying, you made a mistake when it went wrong, we say, we may hold you accountable, but it'll be because you didn't try, not because you tried and failed.
If I could jump on that, in the past it was cost, schedule, performance. Cost, schedule, performance, cost, taxpayer dollar, all of that, which led to the risk aversion of the middle. In fact, we trained them that way down at Fort Belvoir. And so now, back to thinking and operating differently, and the examples that you use. By the way, SDA, the kings of using OTAs and MTAs, other transaction authorities, are really, really good at it. But thinking of operating differently, we have to be able to empower and provide trust to that middle group, or they won't do it, right?
Yeah.
And 80%, maybe that's okay. So it's no longer cost, schedule, performance, but schedule, performance, cost, right? Yeah. Time-based. And so we're going away from a compliance-based to a speed-based. Now,
well, I mean, that's like sorry to interrupt, but it's like on that point, that's where I think my side of the house with venture and the companies, we're trying to change that paradigm where I'm investing early, we're building, and we're trying to change this, the competitive landscape from you're paying costs and materials to Raytheon to just build it in 10 years with no risk and it's all broken, where we're actually...
And we were listening in there live to this discussion in Washington, D.C. We are stepping away for a commercial break. On the other side, we are following some breaking news. Iran's new supreme leader releasing a message. We're going to break down what he said for you next.